Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. A new ISA season has just begun, which means millions of UK savers are researching the new rules.
Hi guys, what you looking at? I'm just reading up on ISAs.
Yes, and I'm pursuing my interest in...
and topping up their accounts with their new fresh 20k allowance.
I gotta do it, man.
But that is not enough for the think tank Resolution Foundation. They've shown up as the party poopers and effectively called for ISAs to be banned, as they're a savings mechanism that only really benefits rich people. Whilst there is some validity to their claims, I personally think that this is a misguided attempt to reverse inequality in the UK, and that there are way more effective methods to do this. So today, let's go through the report and analyze all of their claims one by one to see if they make any sense. Before we get into the Resolution Foundation's report, we have to understand why ISAs exist in the first place. They were originally introduced by Gordon Brown in order to tackle the insanely bad savings culture in the UK. The UK consistently ranks at the bottom of savings as a percentage of GDP amongst its peers. And in addition to that, if you can't save any cash, then you can't invest any cash, which means the UK also ranks towards the bottom of the rankings when it comes to investments as a percentage of GDP as well. So pretty abysmal all round. Individuals saving, or in particular investing their cash, is extremely beneficial to a country in the long run. As for the individual, it means they have more cash to support themselves when it comes to retirement and reduces their reliance on the state. But for the country as a whole, it means that there is much more cash invested into infrastructure, into companies that are developing technology and overall contributing to economic growth. By providing a relatively small allowance for tax-free gains on interest and capital gains for investors and savers, the ISA was meant to encourage and improve the savings culture in the UK and has been replicated in various countries across the world. But it hasn't really worked in the UK as well as what was hoped for. The Resolution Foundation also estimates that the current cost of the ISA to the Treasury is around £6.7 billion in 2023 to the 2024 tax year, which is pretty hefty. The Resolution Foundation showed that the more money you earn, the more likely you are to max out your ISA allowance to put more money into your ISA than people on lower wages. But that is hardly revolutionary. It's pretty obvious that if you earn more money, you're more likely to be able to save more money as well. They also state that 29% of all of the value held within ISAs is owned by the top 10% of earners. And that might seem rather large, but when you look at the top 10%'s average share of the entire wealth in the UK, it's actually way higher at 43%. And a large amount of that can be explained by the fact that the top 1% own so much of the wealth and probably don't even bother with the ISA at all. As a proportion of wealth, the top decile of earners in the UK is actually benefiting from the ISA scheme less than people who earn less income. So is it really the best target to be going after in order to raise a bit of tax income? In my opinion, definitely not. A huge problem that the UK has dealt with over the last few decades has been people investing all of their income into the property market by buying houses or buying rental properties for extra income, rather than investing into capital efficient and productive enterprises and companies by investing into stocks. Now, that's been a huge issue, and by removing the ISA regimen, it would cause a large amount of that money to go directly into the property market, further inflating house prices and effectively adding nothing to the economy. In order to tackle wealth equality in the UK and also deal with the housing market bubble, and at the same time increase allocation of investment towards the equity market rather than property, would be to tax properties more. The top 1% of earners in the UK hold a huge amount of their wealth within property, and understandably so. In the UK, on your primary residence, you pay zero capital gains tax regardless of the value of the property. That means that someone that buys a house for £5 million and sells it for £8 million pays the same amount of tax as someone who buys a 500k house and sells it for 800k, i.e. zero. That's pretty ridiculous, and it's insanely generous and only really benefits the rich. It's not a progressive tax system, and most countries do not have anywhere near that level of generosity when allowing homeowners to not pay tax on their primary residence. In the USA, for example, each homeowner, if you're single, you have a $250,000 limit before you start having to pay capital gains tax on profits, and it's $500,000 gains limit if you're in a marriage. Some of the other stats used in the Resolution Foundation's report are a little facetious when you dig into them a bit more as well. For example, they state that around 30% of households in the UK have less than £1,000 in savings. But when you look at the statistics on what households receive universal credit in the UK or benefits, it is nearly 25%. And if you are receiving universal credit, you aren't allowed to have savings of above £15,000 or you won't receive it. So there is really no incentive to save that much, or you can't save that much. So I don't really think that is a good argument as to why we should ban ISAs. They do make some good points on whether the actual allowance itself should be £20,000, as that could be quite excessive. Only richer people are able to reach that limit. But I would say there is a significant number of lower income earners who have a significant amount of their wealth within ISA accounts. For example, 20% of ISA holders who earn between £10,000 and £50,000 have over £50,000 of their savings in their ISA account. Should they really be punished for scrimping and saving in order to make that money and invest it into productive enterprises rather than potentially investing it into a house? The Resolution Foundation also states that ISAs have not really encouraged people to save or invest more money. And whilst that may be true, I personally think that is due to the terrible state of financial education in the UK. At UK schools, there has been a push to make maths A-levels compulsory, but I think something that would be far more beneficial to the country would be to introduce personal finance classes. But whilst there has been a push to do so from the FT, there's actually been a lot of concerns from teachers who actually don't know any personal finance themselves as to how they would teach the topic. So that's absolutely incredible. If we could improve the financial education and personal finance abilities of children and adults across the country, it would mean that much more of them would use the ISAs themselves and benefit from the tax benefits. Just because the ISA exists and isn't used doesn't mean it's a bad idea. It just means we actually need to teach people about how to use it and why they should be using it in order to invest into companies and productive enterprises. Finally, the Resolution Foundation's solution for solving the problem of lower earners not saving any money and encouraging a culture of saving amongst them is to massively expand the Help to Save scheme. If you don't know what that is, it's effectively a scheme by where people on universal credit can apply to save money. Every £1 that they save within the savings account, the government tops it up by 50p. So it's not really even savings, in my opinion. It's more of an additional handout scheme to people already on universal credit. There's also very little incentive for them to save more than a certain amount of money because, like I said before, if you have more than £15,000 in savings, if you're on universal credit, you're no longer eligible. In addition to that, it doesn't promote investing at all. It's just promoting saving in cash, which isn't something that I personally think is a good idea. If you pay someone 50% of what they save in order to get you to save, it promotes an unrealistic and unhealthy expectation of what you will get when you save money. If someone was to somehow get off universal credit and start saving money without the Help to Save scheme, they'd be like, Why are my interest returns so low at only 5%? They're not 50%, and they probably just end up spending all of the money and not saving anymore. So I don't think that is a very effective scheme. On the topic of cash, I personally agree with cash ISAs being abolished. Now, I know that might be quite controversial, but I don't think that having tax-free accounts for cash should be allowed. Having cash doesn't really benefit the country as a whole, and it doesn't benefit the individual, as over the long term, if you hold cash, it will be inflated away and you'll have nothing left over, or rather far less than what you started with. Now, in the UK, we know that there's around £300 billion in cash ISA accounts compared to around £350 billion in stocks and shares ISAs. If we assume that the tax forgone on the interest on cash ISAs is around £2 to £3 billion a year, just by doing back of the envelope maths, that would cut the cost of the ISA regime by around half, from £6.4 billion to around £3 to £3.5 billion or so. So I do think that that would be a reform that I would completely support, but I know it's a bit of a controversial one. Let me know if you disagree with that one at all. Let me know what you think about my thoughts on the Resolution Foundation's report and the report itself. Let me know in the comments below. Leave me a like and subscribe if you made it this far, and I'll see you guys next time.